I always thought I had a good marriage. Not perfect, because what marriage is, but solid enough. We had a home, 2 kids, and a routine that felt stable. I worked hard to provide, and Olivia, my wife, took care of the house. Or at least, that's what I believed. Looking back, I can't say when things started going wrong. Maybe it always there, lurking beneath the surface, and I was too blind, or too trusting, to see it started with the doctor visits. At first, I didn't question them. Everyone gets sick sometimes, right? But then they became more frequent: headaches, stomach pains, mysterious aches that had no explanation. I don't know what's wrong with me, Olivia would say, clutching her stomach dramatically. I feel awful. She'd disappear for hours, sometimes the whole day, at the hospital, waiting for tests, getting examined. But nothing ever came of it. No diagnosis. No prescriptions. Just more visits that I worried, of course. I asked questions. But she always had answers. The doctors think it might be something serious, she'd say, eyes wide, playing the part of the suffering wife. They need to run more tests. And like a fool, I believed her, but something was off. I started noticing how she dressed before these so-called appointments. Tight skirts, low-cut blouses, like she was going out for drinks, not to see a doctor. When I mentioned it, she snapped at me. What, you don't want me to look presentable? She hissed. You think I should show up looking like a mess? I let it go. I always let things go, but then our intimacy changed. Or rather, it disappeared. Not tonight, she'd sigh, pushing me away. I'm too tired. The stress is too much. Fine, I thought. She's going through something. I need to be patient, but something gnawed at me, a whisper in the back of my mind. What if she wasn't really sick? What if she wasn't just going to the hospital? I didn't know it yet, but my world was about to crumble. The moment I started doubting Olivia, I felt like I was betraying my own marriage. But the signs were there, gnawing at me like rats in the walls. The hospital trips became an obsession. Not hers, mine. I started tracking how often she went. 3, sometimes 4 times a week. Hours at a time. And she always had an excuse: they need to monitor my condition. They think I need a specialist. They might have found something. But no real diagnosis ever came. No medication. No treatment plan. Just more visits. One evening, I decided to test something. I'll come with you tomorrow, I said casually over dinner. The kids were at the table, chewing quietly, oblivious to the storm brewing between their parents. Her reaction was instant. You don't need to do that, she snapped, too quickly, her fork clinking against the plate. It's just a checkup. It's boring. I leaned back, watching her. I don't mind. I want to be there for you. She laughed, but it was forced. You'll just be sitting around in the waiting room for hours. I'll bring a book. She went silent for a second, then scowled. Why are you making such a big deal out of this? And there it was. The crack. A normal wife, a wife who was actually sick, would be grateful. She would want her husband there for support. But Olivia? She was irritated. That night, she started a fight out of nowhere. You don't trust me, do you? She shrieked, pacing in our bedroom, throwing her arms around like she was about to fall apart. You think I'm lying about being sick? I didn't say that, I said, keeping my voice calm. I just don't understand why you don't want me there. She huffed, crossing her arms. Because I don't need you breathing down my neck. You're acting paranoid. I stared at her, something clicking into place. She wasn't scared of being sick. She was scared of me seeing something I wasn't supposed to. The thought made my stomach turn. I dropped it that night, but I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. So the next day, when she left for another checkup, I followed her, and that's when I saw it. She wasn't just going to the hospital. She was meeting someone. A man. A doctor. And my wife, was smiling at him like he was the only man in the world. My hands clenched into fists. My heart pounded like a war drum that I didn't have proof yet. But I knew, and I was going to find out everything that I followed her inside, keeping a safe distance. The hospital was busy, patients and nurses moving in every direction, the smell of antiseptic hanging thick in the air. Olivia walked with a purpose, her heels clicking against the tile floor. She wasn't heading to the reception desk. She wasn't checking in, she was going straight to him, the doctor, tall, smug-looking man in his white coat, leaning against the nurse's station like he owned the place. And when he saw her, his whole face lit up. That was the first sign. I stepped behind a column, just close enough to hear them. "You're late," he said, smirking. Olivia giggled. "Had to shake off my husband. He's getting suspicious." My whole body tensed. "Oh," the doctor mused, tilting his head. "Think he knows?" She scoffed, flicking her hair over her shoulder. "He's too clueless to figure it out. I could tell him I have a brain tumor, and he'd believe it." That was it. That was the moment I knew there was no saving this. No second chances. No fixing a marriage where my wife saw me as a joke. The doctor leaned in, whispering something I couldn't hear, and Olivia bit her lip before nodding. Then they disappeared down the hall together that I forced myself to breathe. To think. Storming after them and confronting them right then and there would have felt good, but I needed more than that. I needed undeniable proof. So I followed them. They weren't heading to an exam room. No nurses. No patients. Just a quiet hallway, a door with his name on it, his office. The man opened it for her, hand grazing her lower back like he owned her. She slipped inside, and he followed, shutting the door behind them. That I didn't hesitate. I walked right up and pressed my ear against the door, shuffling. Whispering. Then a sound I never wanted to hear. A moan. My wife was in there, betraying me, and she thought I was too oblivious to ever find out that I stood there, rage boiling in my chest. I had always been the patient one. The reasonable one. The man who gave her the benefit of the doubt. Not anymore. I wasn't just going to catch her. I was going to ruin her, and I was going to take my kids with me. I stood outside that office door, fists clenched, listening to the sounds of betrayal echoing from inside. Every sound, every whisper sent another jolt of fury through me. I could have kicked the door down right then and there. I could have dragged that doctor out and made him regret ever laying a hand on my wife. But that wasn't enough. I wanted to destroy them. I pulled out my phone, hands steady despite the storm raging inside me. If Olivia thought I was too clueless to ever figure it out, she was about to have a serious wake-up call. I pressed record. For several minutes, I captured everything. The murmured words, the creaking of furniture, Olivia's unmistakable laughter. "I can't believe we get away with this," Olivia's voice purred. The doctor chuckled. "He's never going to find out. He's so predictable," she sighed. "I fake a headache, and he backs off like an obedient little puppy." That was it. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just a betrayal, it was a mockery. I tucked my phone away, exhaling slowly, and forced my expression into something neutral before stepping away from the door. I had what I needed, and I was going to make sure she paid. By the time Olivia got home that night, I was already waiting. She walked in, tossing her purse on the counter like nothing had happened, stretching as if she had endured a long, exhausting day. "Oh, the hospital was packed," she sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I had to wait forever." I just stared at her. She glanced up, something in my expression making her uneasy. "What? How's Dr. Ross?" I asked casually. Too casually, her face twitched. Just for a second. But I saw it. "What?" she repeated, forcing a laugh. "Why would you ask that?" I leaned back in my chair. "Oh, I don't know. You seem to spend a lot of time with him." She blinked, then narrowed her eyes. "Are you accusing me of something?" I shrugged. "Should I be?" She scoffed, crossing her arms. "Oh, for heaven's sake, don't start this jealous husband nonsense. You're being ridiculous." I smiled. And then I pulled out my phone, her entire body went still. I stopped by the hospital today, I said, tapping the screen. The audio started playing, her voice filling the room, her own words. Olivia's face drained of color. What is this? She whispered. I paused the recording and met her gaze. I caught you. Silence. Thick. Suffocating. Then, you spied on me, she shrieked, voice rising like a siren. I let out a short, humorless laugh. Spied? Are you really trying to turn this around on me? Her face twisted into something ugly. You had no right to follow me. Do you know how insane that is? Maybe if you weren't so paranoid, I wouldn't have to look for attention elsewhere. Ah. There it was. The classic cheater move, blame the husband. I stood up, towering over her. You have 5 minutes to pack a bag, I said coldly. Then get out. She gaped at me. You're kicking me out? You think I'm going to let someone like you sleep under my roof? I took a step closer, lowering my voice. This marriage is over. And I'm keeping the kids. Olivia let out a hollow laugh. You think you can take my children from me? They're our children, I corrected. And I have more than enough proof to show a judge exactly the kind of person you are. For the first time, I saw something in her eyes other than arrogance. Fear. She knew I wasn't playing around. I didn't wait for her response. I turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving her standing there, stunned and furious that I had won the first battle, but the war was just getting started. I expected her to leave quietly. Maybe with some pathetic excuse, maybe a few empty tears. But Olivia? No, she exploded. You can't do this to me, she shrieked, storming after me as I walked toward the stairs. You think you're some kind of king just because you caught me? Newsflash, genius, marriages don't end over one little mistake. I stopped mid-step, turned slowly, and laughed right in her face. One little mistake? I echoed, my voice dripping with disbelief. You've been sneaking around with that doctor for months. And the only reason you're upset is because you got caught. She sneered, eyes wild, breathing heavy. And what? You think you're such a perfect husband? You think you don't have any faults? Oh, I definitely have faults, I admitted, stepping closer. But you? You're a liar, a cheat, and an embarrassment. That hit her hard. For a second, she just stood there, nostrils flaring, fists clenching at her sides. Then, out of nowhere, she let out this ear-piercing scream and grabbed the nearest thing, a glass from the counter, and threw it at me. I ducked just in time. The glass shattered against the wall behind me. Our kids came running downstairs, eyes wide with fear. Mom, our oldest, Jake, asked hesitantly. What's going on? Olivia spun around, chest heaving, face twisted into something unhinged. Your father, she spat, is trying to ruin our family. I held up my hand before she could poison their minds any further. Go upstairs, kids. They hesitated, confused, afraid. But they knew. Kids always know when something's beyond fixing. Jake grabbed his younger sister's hand and led her back upstairs without another word. I turned back to Olivia. That's the last time you drag them into this. She let out a hollow laugh. Oh, you think you're keeping them? In what world? In the real world, I said coolly. Where judges don't look too kindly on cheating, manipulative people. Her face twisted, lips curling like she was about to spew more venom. Then, suddenly, she smirked. Oh, honey, she cooed mockingly, tilting her head. You think the courts care about who was unfaithful? You think that's enough to take my babies from me? She stepped closer, eyes gleaming with something dark, something dangerous. I'll tell the judge anything I have to. I'll say you hit me. I'll say you're a drunk. I'll say you're unstable. The air in the room went ice cold. I stared at her, barely breathing, barely believing what had just come out of her mouth. She smirked wider, sensing my shock. There it was. The real Olivia. Not the fake victim. Not the crying, apologetic housewife, just a monster. For the first time, I truly hated her. I leaned in, lowering my voice to something deadly. You'd better pray I don't record every single word you just said. Her smirk flickered. That's right. I'm not playing anymore. I turned and grabbed my keys off the counter. Pack your things, I said, walking toward the door. I'm getting a lawyer. She screamed something behind me, some last, desperate attempt at control, but I didn't look back. I had a war to win. I drove. I didn't know where I was going at first, I just needed to get away from that house, from her. My grip on the steering wheel was tight enough to hurt, my mind racing with every word Olivia had spat at me. I'll say you hit me. I'll say you're a drunk. I'll say you're unstable. That wasn't just anger. That was warfare. That was a woman willing to destroy everything just to win. She wasn't just trying to hurt me, she wanted total annihilation. I pulled into an empty parking lot, my heart pounding. I needed a plan. I needed to be smarter than her. I already had proof of her affair, but if she was willing to lie in court, I needed more. I needed leverage, and I knew exactly where to start. I picked up my phone and called the most expensive divorce lawyer in town. After a few rings, a smooth, confident voice picked up. Law offices of Harrison and Company, how can I help you? I didn't waste time. I need an emergency consultation. My wife is cheating, I have proof, and she's threatening to lie in court to take my kids. There was a pause. Then a quiet, I'll put you through to Mr. Harrison. A second later, a deep, calm voice came on the line. This is David Harrison. Tell me everything. So I did. Every detail. Every lie. Every threat. When I finished, he exhaled sharply. All right. First things first, do not go home. If she's already threatening false accusations, you need to be careful. One wrong move, and she could call the police with some story about domestic violence. She wouldn't, I stopped myself. Of course she would, Harrison confirmed. I've seen this play out 100 times. Women like this don't care about the truth. They care about winning. You need to move strategically. I rubbed a hand over my face. What do I do? Check into a hotel. Call a friend. Get somewhere safe. And from now on, every conversation with her is over text or recorded. Do not engage with her alone. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. And the kids? That's our next step. You have proof of her affair, but we need more to show she's an unfit mother. We'll file for emergency custody, she'll fight it, I muttered. Oh, I know she will, Harrison said, voice dark with amusement. But she's sloppy. And you? You have the advantage. I gritted my teeth. Then let's do it. I checked into a cheap hotel that night, staring at the ceiling, barely able to sleep. By morning, my phone was flooded with missed calls and texts from Olivia. Olivia, where are you? Olivia, you can't just leave like this. Olivia, you're a coward. Olivia, come home now or I swear you'll never see our kids again. Threat after threat. No apologies. No regret. Just pure, venomous control. I didn't respond. Instead, I sent her a single text. Me, you'll be hearing from my lawyer. Her response was instant. Olivia, you piece of garbage. I turned off my phone. I wasn't playing her game anymore. I was about to end it. By noon, I was sitting across from Harrison in his office, my phone on the table, the recorded proof of her affair and threats ready to go. Harrison leaned back in his chair, reviewing the evidence. He gave a low whistle. She really thought she could get away with this. I exhaled sharply. What are my chances of getting full custody? With what we have? He smirked. Better than most fathers. But we're going to bury her in paperwork. If she wants to fight, we're going to make it as hard as possible. I like this guy. We'll file for emergency custody today, he continued. We'll argue that she's been neglecting the kids, prioritizing her affair over their well-being. We'll request a psychological evaluation. And if she tries to lie in court, we'll be ready." I nodded. "What about the house?" "We'll push to have her removed. Given her recent behavior, we can argue that she's volatile. If she resists, we'll take it to court." I sat back, a sense of calm determination settling over me. For the first time since this nightmare started, I felt in control, that I wasn't just reacting anymore, that I was fighting back. By the time Olivia found out what I had done, it was too late. That evening, she stormed into the lawyer's office while I was still there, her face red with fury. "You had me served," she shrieked, waving the legal papers in the air. "You're seriously trying to take the kids?" I didn't flinch. I didn't even stand up. "You made your choices." Her eyes burned with hatred. "You have no right to do this." "Oh, I do," I said smoothly. "And so does the law." She threw the papers at me, her entire body shaking with rage. "You think you're going to win? You think some fancy lawyer is going to scare me?" Harrison finally spoke up, his voice calm, professional. "Actually, Mrs. Dawson, we've already filed an emergency motion for temporary custody. You'll be required to appear in court within the next few days." Her eyes darted to him, then back to me. "You're making a mistake." I leaned forward. "No, you made the mistake. And now, you're facing the consequences." For the first time since this all started, she looked scared, and I enjoyed every second of it. Olivia stood in the lawyer's office, gripping the divorce and custody papers in her trembling hands, her face twisted with fury. She had always been the one in control, always the one who manipulated and schemed her way into getting what she wanted, but not this time. This time, I was fighting back. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself, but the rage in her eyes was unmistakable. "You think this is over?" she hissed. "You think I'm just going to roll over and let you take my kids away from me?" I met her gaze, unwavering. "No, Olivia. I think you're going to fight. And I think you're going to lose." Harrison, my lawyer, leaned forward with a small, knowing smile. "Mrs. Dawson, I strongly suggest you get a legal representative before you say anything else that could be used against you." Her glare snapped toward him. "Oh, don't worry, I'll get a lawyer." She turned back to me, her voice sharp as a blade. "And when I do, I'll make sure you regret ever messing with me." She grabbed her purse and stormed out of the office, slamming the door so hard the glass rattled that I exhaled slowly, my hands still clenched into fists beneath the desk. "She's not going to go down easy," I muttered. Harrison chuckled. "Oh, I know. But she's sloppy. And emotional. And people like her make mistakes. We just have to be ready when she does." 2 days later, I got the call. Olivia had hired an attorney, one of those flashy, aggressive types who advertised on billboards. I wasn't surprised. She wanted someone ruthless, someone who would play dirty. That same day, I received an email with her counterclaims: response to divorce and custody filing. Mother denies allegations of infidelity being relevant to custody determination. Mother asserts father is emotionally manipulative and unfit to be sole guardian. Mother alleges father has a history of controlling behavior and attempts to alienate children from her. Mother demands full custody with father receiving supervised visitation only. Supervised visitation? I felt my stomach turn. She was actually trying to paint me as an unfit father. Harrison read through the document, shaking his head. Predictable. She's setting up a case for emotional abuse. Trying to claim you're controlling. I exhaled sharply. She's the one who lies and manipulates. And she's trying to turn this on me? She'll need proof, he reminded me. And she doesn't have any. He leaned back, folding his hands. But we do. I nodded. We had her affair recorded. We had the threats she made about lying to the court. We had everything. She's going to fight dirty, I said. Harrison smirked. Let her. We're ready. The temporary custody hearing was scheduled a week later. It was meant to determine where the kids would live while the divorce played out in court. I arrived in my suit, head held high, ready to fight. Olivia showed up in a completely different outfit than usual. Gone were the tight skirts and expensive heels. Today, she was dressed in a modest, soft blue dress, her hair neatly tied back, minimal makeup. She was playing the role of the devoted mother. I could already hear the sob story she was preparing to tell. Her lawyer, a slick-looking guy with a too-white smile, approached me before we entered the courtroom. "Mr. Dawson," he greeted, all fake politeness. "I just wanted to say, this is a tough situation for everyone. Maybe we can come to a mutual agreement today?" I didn't even blink. "I'm here for full custody. There's nothing to negotiate." His fake smile faltered. "Then I suppose we'll let the judge decide." "Sounds good to me." We entered the courtroom. The judge, a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s, looked down at us as the proceedings began. Olivia's lawyer stood first. "Your Honor," he began, voice smooth as butter, "my client is a loving, devoted mother who has cared for these children their entire lives. This sudden, aggressive attempt to separate them from her is not only unjust but clearly an act of retaliation by a bitter husband." I clenched my jaw. "I expected this." "She's their mother," he continued. "They need stability. They need love. And removing them from their primary caregiver would be devastating." Then it was our turn. Harrison stood, buttoning his jacket as he stepped forward. "Your Honor," he said, voice calm and confident, "the mother has indeed been present in their lives. But she has not been providing them a stable home." He walked toward the judge's bench, holding up my phone. "We have proof that Mrs. Dawson has been engaging in an extramarital affair for several months. Not only does this demonstrate questionable moral character, but it directly impacted her role as a mother. She was leaving home for hours on end, lying about medical issues to cover up her deception, and in doing so, neglecting her children." The judge's expression didn't change, but I saw her posture shift slightly. Harrison continued, pressing harder. "And we also have recordings of Mrs. Dawson making threats. In her own words, she stated that she would fabricate abuse allegations in order to manipulate these proceedings." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. I chanced a glance at Olivia. Her face was pale. She didn't expect me to fight back, she expected me to roll over and take it. The judge held up a hand. "I'd like to hear these recordings." Harrison pressed play. Olivia's voice filled the silent courtroom. "I'll say you hit me. I'll say you're a drunk. I'll say you're unstable." Dead silence. Then, the judge slowly turned to Olivia. "Mrs. Dawson, do you have an explanation for this?" Olivia's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time, she had nothing to say. I watched as the judge leaned back in her chair, exhaling. Then she spoke the words I had been waiting to hear. "For the time being, I am granting temporary full custody to the father." I won the first battle, but I knew Olivia, she wasn't done yet. I sat in that courtroom, my heart still hammering in my chest as the judge's words settled over me. I had won, for now I could feel Olivia's eyes burning into me, but I didn't look at her. I didn't need to. I already knew what was coming. She wasn't going to take this quietly. She never did. As soon as the judge adjourned the hearing, Olivia practically lunged toward her lawyer, her voice a furious whisper. I didn't need to hear the words to know she was already scheming, already trying to find a way to flip this back in her favor. Harrison placed a firm hand on my shoulder. "Don't get comfortable," he muttered. "She's not going to give up. Not after this." I nodded. "I know. And I was ready for it." That evening, I picked up Jake and Emily from Olivia's sister's house, where they had been staying during the hearing. The moment I pulled into the driveway, Jake ran toward me. "Dad," he said, his face lighting up as he threw his arms around me. I hugged him tightly, feeling the weight of the last few weeks crash down on me. "Hey, buddy." Emily followed more hesitantly, glancing over her shoulder as if expecting Olivia to swoop in at any moment. When I knelt down, she hesitated before finally wrapping her arms around my neck. "You're staying with me for a while," I told them gently. Okay? Jake nodded immediately. Good. Emily just whispered, is Mom mad? I swallowed the lump in my throat. She's just upset right now. But it's not your fault, okay? She nodded but didn't say anything else. The drive home was quiet. Too quiet. Jake kept looking out the window, his jaw clenched, and Emily just held onto her stuffed rabbit, staring at the dashboard. When we got home, I tried to lighten the mood. All right, guys. Pizza night. You pick the toppings. Jake managed a small smile. Pepperoni. Cheese. Emily mumbled that it was small, but it was something. As I was setting up the plates, Jake suddenly blurted out, Mom's been acting weird. I turned, keeping my voice calm. Weird how? He hesitated, picking at his sleeve. She cries a lot. But when she talks about you, she's just mean. She says stuff like you're taking us to punish her. That you don't really care about us. My stomach tightened. I knelt in front of him. Jake, listen to me. I love you and your sister more than anything. This isn't about punishing anyone. It's about making sure you're safe and happy. Jake studied me for a long moment before nodding. I know, Dad. Mom just makes it confusing. Yeah. That was Olivia's specialty. The next morning, my phone rang. Olivia. I let it go to voicemail. Then came the text messages. Olivia, you think you've won? You haven't. This isn't over, Olivia. You're brainwashing them against me. I won't let you do this, Olivia. They belong with me. And I will get them back. I stared at the screen. I had expected anger. I had expected her to lash out, but something about the certainty in her words sent a chill down my spine. She's planning something, I muttered to myself. I called Harrison. She's already sending threats, I said as soon as he answered. Not surprised, he replied. Don't respond. Let her dig her own grave. I exhaled. What's the next step? We prepare for the final custody hearing. And in the meantime, we keep an eye on her. I wasn't sure what that meant, until the very next day. Olivia made her first move. I was making breakfast when there was loud knock on my front door, not a normal knock. A pounding. I opened the door to find two police officers standing on my porch. Mr. Dawson, one of them asked. My stomach sank. Yes? We need to speak with you regarding some allegations made by your wife. I already knew what was coming. She's claiming you've been emotionally abusive toward the children and that you're manipulating them to turn against her. There it was. Her first attempt to destroy me. I exhaled slowly, keeping my voice steady. That's not true. And I have plenty of proof to show that. The officer nodded, exchanging a glance with his partner. We still need to ask the children a few questions. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stay calm. I understand. Jake and Emily were still at the table when the officers stepped inside. The questions were gentle at first. Simple. Do you feel safe here? Has your dad ever made you feel scared or upset? Has he ever said bad things about your mom to you? Jake answered clearly. No. He doesn't do that. Emily, still nervous, just shook her head. After a few minutes, the officers stepped aside. One of them gave me a nod. Mr. Dawson, we don't see any immediate concerns. But we have to file a report. If she continues to push these allegations, there might be an investigation. Of course. That was Olivia's plan. She wanted me to crack. She wanted me to lose my temper, to slip up, to look guilty. I wouldn't give her that satisfaction. After the officers left, I called Harrison again. She's playing the long game, I told him. She's trying to build a case. He sighed. We were expecting this. The good news? False allegations can backfire. If we prove she's making things up to gain leverage, it'll destroy her credibility in court. I pinched the bridge of my nose. So we just let her keep trying? We let her dig her own grave. I wasn't sure I had the patience for that, but I knew one thing: Olivia wasn't going to stop until she either won or destroyed everything in the process, and I wouldn't let her. I barely slept that night. The visit from the police had shaken me more than I wanted to admit. Not because I was guilty of anything, because I knew Olivia wasn't done. She was testing the waters, seeing if she could scare me, push me, or get me to react. She was going to try again, and this time, she wouldn't just use words. The next morning, I dropped Jake and Emily off at school like usual. I made sure to hug them a little longer before they ran inside. Something about today felt off. At exactly 12:37 p.m., my phone rang. It was the school principal. I answered immediately. "Mr. Dawson," she said in a tight voice. "We need you to come down to the school immediately. There's been an incident." My stomach dropped. What happened? Are my kids okay? "They're fine," she said quickly. "But their mother showed up today." "Olivia." I knew it. "She attempted to pick them up early," the principal continued. "But she's not authorized. We informed her of the temporary custody ruling, and she didn't take it well." That was an understatement. When I got to the school, Olivia was still there. She was standing in the main office, red-faced and furious, her voice sharp as she argued with the staff. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "I am their mother. I have every right to take them home." A school security officer was standing near her, arms crossed. The moment she saw me walk in, she exploded. "Oh, look who finally shows up," she sneered. "Tell them to let me take my kids home." I kept my voice calm. Controlled. "Olivia, you know the court order. You're not allowed to take them." "They're my kids," she screamed. "You stole them from me." The security officer stepped forward. "Ma'am, you need to lower your voice." She turned on him. "Or what? You'll call the cops?" "Go ahead. My husband's already making up lies about me, might as well add another." The principal sighed, rubbing her temples. "Mrs. Dawson, you need to leave. Or we will have to involve the authorities." That was the final straw. Olivia turned to me, pointing a shaking finger. "This isn't over." Then she stormed out. That night, I sat in Harrison's office, exhaustion creeping into my bones. "She tried to take them," I said. "She showed up at their school and demanded they release them to her." Harrison sighed. "She's escalating. Which means it's time for us to escalate too." He pulled out a form. "We're filing an emergency motion for a restraining order." I sat up. "You think we can get that? With her stunt at the school?" "Yes. Judges don't like when parents pull this kind of thing. She violated the court order, she disrupted the school, it's reckless. And reckless behavior does not look good in custody battles." I exhaled. "Let's do it." 2 days later, we were back in court. Olivia sat across from me, calm now, dressed in soft neutral colors, her makeup natural and subtle. She was playing the innocent mother again, but the judge wasn't buying it. I presented everything: the school's incident report, the security officer's written statement, the recorded audio of her threats from before. Harrison didn't hold back. "Your Honor, this is a pattern of escalating, unstable behavior. Mrs. Dawson is not acting in the best interest of her children, she's acting out of spite." Olivia's lawyer tried to spin it. "She was simply an emotional mother acting out of love," he argued. "She was desperate to see her children." The judge raised a hand. Desperation does not excuse ignoring a court order. She turned to Olivia. "Mrs. Dawson, you cannot behave like this. This kind of reckless behavior is precisely why I granted temporary custody to the father." Olivia clenched her jaw, trying to look wounded and misunderstood. Then the judge delivered the final blow: "This court is issuing a temporary restraining order. You will not attempt to contact Mr. Dawson or remove the children from school. Any violations of this order will result in immediate legal consequences." I won again. Olivia lost it. She didn't scream, didn't argue. Instead, she let out a breathless, disbelieving laugh. She shook her head and muttered, "You're really trying to erase me from their lives." I didn't take the bait. I just stood and walked out of the courtroom. She wasn't getting another reaction from me, but I knew, deep down, this wasn't over. She wasn't done, and whatever she did next, it was going to be bad. The custody battle had stretched on for months. Olivia tried everything: false accusations, emotional breakdowns in court, and even bringing fake witnesses to testify against me, but nothing worked. Every lie she told, I had evidence to crush it. Every move she made, my lawyer was one step ahead. By the time we reached the final custody hearing, Olivia was a wreck. She sat across from me, her once pristine appearance now haggard and desperate. Her lawyer looked frustrated, probably because even he knew they were about to lose. The judge took her seat, flipping through the thick stack of documents in front of her. After reviewing all presented evidence, she began, "It is clear to this court that Mrs. Dawson has engaged in a pattern of deceitful and manipulative behavior. Not only was she unfaithful to her spouse, but she attempted to falsify abuse allegations, violate a restraining order, and interfere with a standing court decision." I kept my face calm, but inside, my pulse was racing. This was it: the children's well-being must come first. And based on the overwhelming evidence before this court, the judge glanced at Olivia before delivering the final verdict: full custody is granted to the father. The mother will have limited visitation rights, subject to court supervision. Silence. Olivia's entire face drained of color, then she exploded. "This is a joke," she screamed, jumping to her feet. "He's been lying. Manipulating everyone. I'm their mother." The judge didn't even flinch. "Mrs. Dawson, sit down." But Olivia didn't. She turned on me instead, eyes blazing. "You did this to me. You turned my own children against me." I finally spoke. Calm. Cold. "No, Olivia. You did this to yourself." Her face twisted with pure hatred. But it didn't matter. I had won. A month later, the divorce was finalized. Olivia fought for more visitation rights, but the judge wouldn't budge. She had burned too many bridges, she had lied too many times. The last time I saw her, she barely looked like the woman I had once married. She was bitter, defeated, and for the first time in a long time, I felt free. Jake and Emily were safe. They were happy, and Olivia? She was just a bad memory. A lesson I'd never forget, because in the end, the truth won, and so did I.